Welcome back, Year 12. Now, as you know, we're still under our umbrella topic of social diversity, and we are working our way through an exam task. So really, we call this procedural practice, putting into practice, learning the procedures of the exam and applying the knowledge that we have. So we just quick bit of context and recap, really, guys. So you just need to endure for a few minutes. So we are over here. We are looking at a section B. We did a section A essay style before we broke up, seeing each other in person. We are now over here at question 3. Okay, learning how to build an analysis response. Next week we'll be looking at section B. So to that end, we've introduced a simple plan that we were planned to analyze the graphological features of the two texts that we are analyzing. So headlines stand first, any other visual elements. We are analyzing the opening sentence or section, potentially then analysis of up to 3 viewpoints, 3 points from within each article where they are offering a particular viewpoint. We analyze the closing sentence and section and a summative conclusion. So again, there's a potential here for a 5-paragraph essay as a minimum and up to a 8-section essay as a maximum. We then introduced this new acronym, okay, the ability to identify and interpret a perspective, the ability to describe how language works to present that idea using language labels, the explanation of the effects and representation created, and the ability to, for the higher grades, appreciate how language works in the bigger context and to create links and comparisons. If you remember the small disclaimer for that link and compare, there is a whole element of the mark scheme that is designated in this question and this question alone, question 3, for your ability to link and compare. So actually, the linking has to be evident throughout your essay to get a C or higher. So we also then have done something we've not done before. We are looking at a past paper response. Now, I can't remember if I made it clear, so I do apologize. This is the example response that the exam board have put out that qualifies as an A, but it isn't analysing the 2 texts we are. It's analysing 2 gender texts, actually 2 texts that present attitudes and ideas about gender. So what we will find is that the explicit examples that the candidate is analysing are not ones that we can use. They're not the examples from the 2 texts we've read. So what we're really looking at in this response is one way, okay, one way, like one direction, one way that this candidate is building up lines of analysis. It is an example, it is a model. If you develop a different way, and today I'm going to show you some different ways of building up lines of analysis, the ideal position you want to be in is that you use the method, the approach that works for you, because we are autonomous, we are individual, okay? Our writing styles will be individual, our styles of analysis will be individual. As long as you can construct paragraphs that represent the key elements, that you identify a viewpoint, that you can use descriptive language labels, that you can explain and evaluate, that you can appreciate and link, however that looks within your particular paragraph, you will be successful. If you take all the examples I offer and then write a paragraph all of your own that doesn't have any description of language labels, that doesn't talk about perspective and viewpoint, that fails to explain or appreciate context or links, then I'm sorry, but there will be an impact and you will not get the marks in line with the mark scheme. So there is a point when we start to choose to create our own style that if we go too far away from the mark scheme, and all these models are based on a mark scheme, then yeah, sadly, you will lose marks. So guys, the last time we were together then, you were left with the challenge, with the task of writing your response to the graphological features. You were tasked with writing an analysis using the model, using some of the ideas we looked at to analyze the graphological features. Okay, so I didn't necessarily say that you had to send that to me for me to check. You can just wait until the whole essay is done and send me the whole essay. But I have had some lovely kind of examples sent and discussions already. So don't be afraid if you want to check in with me that you send me evidence in advance, or you can wait until the hand-in date for the essay. Okay, so what are we doing today? Well, it's a little bit of like a repeat eat, sleep, rave, repeat, a repetition of that model of looking at different ways to construct these ideal paragraphs, and then you will be challenged to write your own. So in our heads, okay, we should have this opening section analysed. So from last lesson, you should have achieved an analysis using the ideal model of the headlines of text A and B, and or stand firsts of text A and B. Now, I just want you to pause here. I want you to make sure that you're set up. I know it's a bit frustrating. You're going to have the YouTube video. You're going to need your notes, but it's just the best way to work. So I want you to make sure that you've got your two texts, that you've got the table that we completed and any notes for ease of reference, okay, so that you're ready to move forward with me. Okay, so we should be ready. So you've got the two texts, the piece of writing you did last week. Now, as I said, I'm going to show you different models today. The first model we've looked at is taking an existing candidate's essay and actually using it to lift our lines. Now, what I want to show you is that we can also use what we call just the acronyms. Now, guys, I'm going to have to turn off my oven. Now I'm going to have to make the screen slightly different. There's no way that I can live type with the screen at this size. So we're going to look then at using this ideal model. If we didn't have a candidate's example to look at, how could we use it to turn this table that you completed into lines of analysis? So if you imagine we've done this paragraph, that was the one we did last lesson where we really analysed graphological features. Today we're going to come in here at an analysis of the opening. No, please. Okay, so as you can see, I've had to just reduce the size of the screen so I can do some live. So what we've got here is our acronym: identify and interpret, describe, explain, appreciate, and link. Now, if we were doing this together in class, I would be asking you to help me at this stage. So I'm going to imagine that you are all obviously listening and verbally shouting ideas out to the screen. So the first thing is we've got to identify and interpret a perspective. Now, this is where the table can be a helpful tool. We can't use it in the exam, but when we're practicing this in class, when we practice this, this table is a good scaffold. It's a good scaffolding step. So look, I'm over here in my table. Okay, so when we were last together, I said, okay, the opening sentence from text A says, they say you should always dress for success, but should that extend to the way you speak? I'd already made some notes that it's an interrogative, it's using a metaphor about dressing. We've got the pronoun you that might be worth looking at. That little highlighted that tells us that this is a complex sentence. Now, from an AO3 point of view, in terms of meaning, I've already made some notes here. Okay, it's a little bit reductive. So this person believes it's reductive, you know, trying to simplify the process of changing accents into this idea of dressing for success is reductive. You're saying that a person can change their identity like they would change their clothes. Now, it's not that the person is reductive, but the person is angry. Not angry, sorry, is challenging this idea that people should be able to change the way they speak as easily as changing clothes. So that's going to help us in a minute think about identifying a perspective. In person number 2, we've got the opening sentence, of text B. Last month, I attended an international academic conference. Just some notes here then from an AO3 point of view that this person is drawing upon a personal experience. Okay, so they're emotionally invested, but they are also informed. We know they're informed because she's a university lecturer. She's got the credentials, the academic credentials. And in that stand first that we might have analysed last time, she also makes it clear that she has investigated this. So this is just not, I'm feeling that this is happening. This is somebody that was feeling and investigating. So that lovely bringing together of emotion and reason. Okay, so she's got lots of ideas. The International Academic Conference here, it's that noun phrase, International Academic Conference, that's showing that she believes that she is a success in her field. Okay, now all over here as well, we've already done some points of comparison. Okay, so we've got the interrogative versus declarative. We've got the detached BBC approach versus the personal approach of text B. We've got metaphor versus anecdotal. So we've already highlighted some potential differences. So can you see that this table is almost like thinking out loud? I'm thinking out loud on paper. These are all my thoughts. Over here, then I'm going to start to try and bring these thoughts into a sentence of a paragraph of analysis that uses this acronym. So I'm doing a different model. So we're not looking at what the other candidate's done today. We're going to try and do it on our own using the acronym. So it says here that we need to identify and interpret a perspective. Now, perspective means, okay, the point of view of the writers towards a particular topic. Now, sometimes when we start doing this process, I model from the C and we work it up. Now, one of the seemingly obvious ways to approach this is use the language of the model, use the language of the mark scheme. So we want to get in our opening sentence this word perspective. So we could begin with, okay, in the opening of text A, the writer offers, so I'm just starting to think, in the opening of text A, the writer offers, the writer presents, ... perspective. Okay, so in the opening of text A, the writer presents. Now we've already got some clues here that over in this comparison, we've got words like detached versus personal. So we could say, now the reason text A is more detached, we could argue it's the BBC website. Now detached doesn't mean they don't have an opinion, but at the moment they are approaching the opinion with the absence of emotion. So we could say, in the opening of text A, the writer presents a seemingly detached, objective perspective. Now, anything I kind of like just highlight, this is places where, because we're thinking out loud, I'm thinking and writing with you. If we were in class, I might stop and change. This is what I'm calling drafting. Is it going to be the best paragraph I've ever written in my life? No, because I'm a realist. But it's just showing you through that process. So we have now done the first I. We have identified the perspective. So in the opening of text A, the writer presents a seemingly detached, objective perspective. Now, because I always like to tie it into specifics, it's towards accents, towards speech, okay? A seemingly detached, objective perspective as they consider the impact of changing the way a person speaks. So there's my I. Now, we could have made that much more concise. Sometimes, again, within these paragraphs, the different elements can have different balance. Sometimes your discussion of a perspective can be extended. Sometimes it can be very short and succinct. So, tick, I've done my I. So it then challenges me to describe how the language works to present that idea using language labels. So again, because we've planned this, I've already got some notes here. I can talk about the use of the interrogative. I could talk about the use of the pronoun you. Although it wasn't one initially, there's lovely repetition of the modal should. They say, and who's this they as well? So there's so much here from a linguistic point of view that interests me. If I was in an exam, I might be going down a rabbit hole. Where do I start? What do I do? Okay, well, what I should do is create cohesion. So I've already said detached and objective. So if I start talking about who's this they, I'm not really addressing what I've already said at the eye level. I'm going in a different direction. So what I really want is I want to get the evidence that suggests that they are being a little bit more detached and objective. And that really comes through the choice of the interrogative. By posing it as a question, they are not yet committing themselves to an answer. They are creating a more open, objective approach. So actually, when we've got that detached, objective perspective, my choice of language really needs to link to that idea. Okay, so when I'm describing how the language works, really, I could choose a random word class within that opening sentence to analyze, and that would still be using language labeling, but I would lack the cohesion. So in the opening of text A, the writer presents a seemingly detached, objective perspective as they consider the impact of changing the way a person speaks. So the use of the interrogative, now that is a label. guys, that's a C grade label. Okay. Now, if I was looking already to what we call embed and extend the potential here, I might double label. I might say, well, it's an interrogative, but I also know that it's a complex interrogative because of the relative subordinate clause. Sorry, because of the subordinate clause, that is creating a relative structure. So I could talk about that. So the use of the, so I'm just going to go back. So the use of the complex interrogative. Yeah. Now, when you're quoting, again, you don't always have to use the full quote. You can use the ellipsis. They say, yeah, you can use the ellipsis, which is the 3 dots, to kind of compress the quote. So the use of the complex interrogatives, they say, you speak. Now, that is already then, so there's my language labels for the D. Just going to use a slightly different color. Okay, I'm happy because I've got my quote in. That's the D element. So actually, sometimes the describing of the language is sometimes shorter. We embed it, we integrate it, and often it can be linked directly into the E, the explanation. So the use of the complex interrogative. Now, what have I got to explain? Now, this is why it's about cohesion, and this is what I'm trying to illustrate. Really, I could go off in a random, or sorry, in a generic way. The use of the question or the use of the interrogative shows that the writer is questioning the reader. Now, that is an explanation, but it's generic. What I really want to do is to explain, well, what is the point of this particular question? So we need to look at it again. They say you should always dress for success, but should that extend to the way you speak? So actually, they're creating a link between dressing for success and speech. So the idea of they're questioning the relationship between success and speech. And that's the real bit we want to do. We want to zoom in on here, okay? So the use of the complex interrogative, they say, now if we're explaining, we're giving a reason why we're using because. The evaluate is about whether it works well. Okay, so let's have a look then. The use of the complex interrogative, they say, ... you speak. So now I'm going to start to explain the meaning, the representation, the effects of that question. So the use of the complex interrogative, they say ... but should that extend to the way you speak? Okay, uses, creates an objective position as the writer presents the relationship between success and speech. So guys, this is me thinking out loud, so I'm just slowing down. I might change it in a minute. So the use of the complex interrogative, they say, creates an objective position as the writer presents the relationship between success and speech as an issue to be considered and reflected upon. The question creates an invitation into the discussion rather than presenting. So what we're going to say is rather than a statement, now statements present information, statements present ideas in a more definite way, rather than presenting an answer. Now, so just quickly, okay, so at this E stage, so I might have to make our text a little bit smaller for a minute. So in the, sorry guys, see, this bit was always going to be trickier. In the opening of text day, the writer presents a seemingly detached objective perspective as they consider the impact of changing the way a person speaks. The use of the complex interrogative, they say speak, creates an objective position as the writer presents the relationship between success and speech as an issue to be considered and reflected upon. The question creates an invitation into the discussion rather than presenting an answer. Now, if I wanted to be evaluative, I could simply do things like this. The writer successfully. Now I'm beginning to be evaluative because I'm saying it works. The writer successfully presents the relationship between success and I've just seen success and success, so I might change that, say effectively, so that I'm not using two words that are too similar, too close to each other. So the writer effectively presents the relationship between success and speech as an issue to be considered and reflected upon. The question creates an invitation into discussion rather than an answer. Now, I could then still zoom in on something, so I could talk about the use. So even though it's a complex sentence, the use of the but as a hinge point within this shows a change in direction. The but does suggest that actually it shouldn't be as simple as, yes, success is linked to the way you speak, but is a challenge point. So actually, although it's a seemingly, that's why I use that adverb of seemingly detached and objective perspective, actually, if we really wanted to begin to get the evaluative explanation that gets the higher grades, we could then just zoom in. So, ready? However, the use of the connective but, and then we could say the coordinated connective but, so, however, the use of the coordinating connective but creates a hinge point within the presentation of this conflict between accent and appearance. So I've used accent and appearance there as synonyms for speech and success. And it immediately then, but should that extend to the way you speak, is immediately actually really saying that this isn't as detached as we think. However, the use of the coordinate connective but creates a hinge point within the presentation of this conflict between accent and appearance, aligning, suggesting, position. We've used positioning, in which the writer is really aligning themselves with the idea that you shouldn't be judged on how you speak. Brilliant. Okay, so as we've seen, we're just building a paragraph. Now, I have to be honest, when a teacher does writing like this, i.e. when I do writing like this, it always reminds me of one of my favourite moments from a favourite film called Spinal Tap. Now, in Spinal Tap, a little pop culture reference for you. It's like a parody of being in a rock band. And one of the characters is really impressed. And it's like a mockumentary. And he's showing the documentary maker around his room because he's got special speakers that turn all the way up to 11. And he's like, mine are the best speakers in the world. They're the loudest speakers in the world. They turn up all the way to the 11. And the guy's like, okay. And sometimes when you do shared writing like this, it's like turning our paragraphs all the way up to 11. Really, there is a lot more content in this paragraph than you would ever be able to really produce under time conditions. But it's still illustrating that process. So what we've really got, when I began to introduce the coordinating connective but idea, is that potential that if you are analysing and you pick up the pace of analysis, you can potentially zoom in on individual words within a sentence that you've chosen to analyse. Okay, so the last bit we were just looking at then is this idea of the detached objective, but actually through that use of the but, the writer is really aligning themselves with the idea that you shouldn't be judged on how you speak. They are beginning to demonstrate a little bit more of a biased opinion, a personal opinion actually, but in a more discreet way. So when it comes to this appreciating context, then there is again place here for variation. Okay, now context could be, let's put it back into the context of the BBC website. Let's put this back into the context that this is the opening of the article. So it's designed to maybe use an interrogative as a hook to get you invested in reading on. So we could talk about context in terms of the BBC article. We could talk about context in terms of so the BBC article, so that would be context in terms of genre and form. We could talk about context in terms of the opening of the article, so the overall cohesion, so that this is coming at the beginning. Now, this other way of putting it into context is a grade moment. The other way we can put it into context is what we call the context of the discourse. Now, the discourse means the wider conversation around the relationships between speech and society. In other words, is there anything here that reminds us of anything else any of our theories have suggested? So they say you should always dress for success, but should that extend to the way you speak? Now, the reason I wanted to just do this context part from an A grade moment is that somebody has spoken to me about this. So when we talk about appreciating context, hear me. There is room with context to look at the type of text. There is room within context to look at where within the article the quote has come from. So putting it back into the context of the article. So both of those two are looking at the text itself. However, a way to think about context from the top end, so this is like A to almost A star moment, and we don't see our guide, our student doing this. So it is possible to get an A grade without doing this, but this is part of the mark scheme. So we can do what we call appreciate within the discourse, the wider conversation around accents and behavior, like society and speech. So in other words, our theorists. So really quickly, who was our theorist that looked at the way people were speaking when they were at work? Who went into department stores where people were working and saw in evidence that they were adapting the way they spoke, if they thought they were going to be more successful at work? Did you say it? Did you get it? Lab off. So when we're appreciating in context, we can create a link to theory. So we've got here, the writer is really aligning themselves with the idea that you shouldn't be judged on how you speak. So we could do this. Now, this is a to A star moment, okay? But it's a good time to say this. So we could say, however, this this modern point of view suggesting that you shouldn't be pressurized to change your accent challenges the reality that people experience. Okay? Now, are we ready? This is now putting it into the bigger context. For example, reality. The work of Labov in the 1960s shows that historically people have adapted the way they speak within the workplace to achieve success and promotion. Now, I'm going to do this in a slightly different color. So I'm just going to show, guys, if we just highlight this in a big yellow. Right, so that is like an A grade, top A grade moment, because actually we're still appreciating in context, but we've shifted context. Now, guys, I know I'm verbally talking about this, so if you want, you can just pause and write this down on your notes in big letters somewhere, maybe next to that acronym, the ideal appreciating context. So context can be interpreted differently for different parts of that A grade mark scheme. Okay, so we did say one way to appreciate in context is look at the type of text. Okay, this is a BBC article. Text B is a Telegraph article. Those are two different contexts. So look at text type. Context, look at where the evidence is coming within the cohesive kind of journey narrative of what you're reading. So this is from the beginning. So there's a good chance that if this was at the end, it might be worded differently. So contextualize your evidence, put it back into the bigger picture of the whole article. So context can be text type, it can be where the evidence is coming. However, this is your A, kind of like A grade, A start moment, okay? Context can also be look at what your writer is saying within the bigger discourse, the bigger conversation about the topic of accent in society. In other words, are they saying the same thing as some of our theorists, or are they saying something different? Okay. So and that's one way that we could do it. So Liv, I hope that kind of just directs you. If you wanted to use theory, that's how we can do it. Okay, so we've appreciated in context. Now, this next little bit, this is the link. Now, this in itself is not, it's really, we've got to be really aware that it doesn't just become a tokenistic. But our link can also be a really good way to structure our essay. So really, we're going to use the link point to take us into the next paragraph where we're going to be writing about the opening of text B. So we could say to achieve success and promotion. So that link and compare. So as the link and compare, let's have a look then. So we could say, however, this modern point of view suggesting that you shouldn't be pressurized to change your accent, challenge the reality that people experience. The work of Vladbov in the 1960s shows that historically people have adapted the way they speak within the workplace to achieve success and promotion. Now, I hadn't done it on purpose, but that's a lovely moment. I'm just reading the end of my paragraph. I want now to link between my final idea there, my context idea, and where we're going to go. Now, I hadn't done this on purpose, but text B is a beautiful example of somebody who has been pressurized to change the way they speak within the workplace. Yeah, so that's an immediate link. So we're going to say this. I'll change the color in a minute. So this reality for people is a key aspect of text B, as the writer uses an anecdotal approach to illustrate how she herself was pressurized. She herself came under pressure to change her speech. Boom. So there we got. This reality for people is a key aspect of text B, as the writer uses an anecdotal approach to illustrate how she herself came under pressure to change her speech. There's our link. Then we would say, so then we would go into the next paragraph, and we've already got the ideas there. Can you see? Because you're going to do this now. Last month I attended. So you could say, now you could begin text B. Yep, the opening of text B establishes an anecdotal approach through the use of the first person pronoun I. So you've got options. That's option. A new option, sorry. So we've seen historically, I'm just going to make it go bigger again because I've stopped my shared writing. Let's just see that we can use a existing candidate to give us a model for writing. That's what we did last lesson. And we analyze the stand firsts and the headlines. We've now said, though, that you can use this model where we actually just create from our table that we did, okay, an analysis of the opening. So what I would like you to do now is pause, and I would like you to analyze text B. So the opening of text B, there's a little guidance there if you don't know what to do. Last month, I attended International Academic Conference, and I want you to see if you can do it using the ideal model, but not being reliant upon our candidate's response. Okay, so we're building up our essay. Now, at any point that we're doing this and you want to redraft something you've done earlier, this is the way to do it. So what you're going to stop and do now is we've got the opening of text A. Now, if we all produce that same opening of text A, we could argue that we've all got an example paragraph, but it won't be indicative of what we ourselves can do. So your challenge now is to analyse the opening of text A and B using the ideal model. Okay, that's what I would love to see. Now tomorrow we'll move a little bit quicker because we are breaking this down, and we'll look at how we build the rest of the essay. Okay, if you are looking at the PDFs, you'll know they go on, they take us through the journey of the whole week. There is a little bit now, if you are you want the support, there are little bits of examples that can help you. There is another example there from text A and text B, so from our candidate, how he develops his essay. But that's if you're really stuck. I would like you to try and use the ideal model itself today. So you can look on through the PDFs to help you. So just to clarify, what do I want you to achieve today is I want you to have your analysis essay, to have analysed the graphological features and to analyse the opening of both articles. I know I'm slowing this process down for us because I want you to write intentionally and carefully, okay? Obviously, in the future, you just get the two texts, you get like an hour, 45 minutes to read and then analyse. So we are really slowing this process down because I want to lay a really good foundation and an understanding of why we do what we do. Okay, lovelies, off you go.